So the government took over the Sports Hub in 2022 with the vision, one, to establish Singapore and the Sports Hub as the leading sports and entertainment destination in the region, two, to inculcate a strong sense of affinity between Singaporeans and the Sports Hub, and three, to maximize synergies across the suite of facilities in the broader Kallang Alive precinct in order to better activate the precinct. Kallang Alive Sport Management, the entity that was put in charge of operating the Sports Hub after the government takeover, set out to be more than simply a venue for hire. CASM, which is a short-form acronym for Kallang Alive Sport Management, has a team which actively identifies and curates suitable content and programs and brings them into Singapore. Our aim is to bring a whole spectrum of events to Kallang for Singaporeans, from top-tier marquee events to community-related ones, and from music concerts to sporting as well as social events. Since we took over, the Sports Hub has seen a 30% increase in sports, entertainment, and community and lifestyle events in the number of days, event days, since the government takeover, compared to the best number of event days prior to the COVID pandemic. There were some questions at takeover around whether the Sports Hub would be able to continue to attract top-tier events into Singapore. In the last year, apart from the ongoing Taylor Swift concerts, we have brought in several world-class acts such as Mayday, Coldplay, Ed Sheeran, and Jackie Chung. We have also brought in marquee sporting events, including the FIBA Intercontinental Cup that came to Asia for the first time in 2023, the Super 750 Series Singapore Badminton Open, the HSBC Singapore Sevens, the WTT Singapore Smash, of which the third edition will begin sometime later this week, and innovative concepts such as fitness racing series High Rocks. In the case of Taylor Swift, we moved fast and early to bring her show into Singapore. And we did so as we recognized the large Swifties fan base in Singapore as well as in the region, and were keen to deliver the concert experience to them right here at the Sports Hub. The idea for A-list marquee events to be staged at the Sports Hub was conceived of even before the government takeover in December 2022, as we recognized the tremendous upside of such concerts to Singapore. In February 2023, my colleagues and I from MCCY, Sport SG, and CASM went to the US to study the sport and entertainment industry. When the opportunity to discuss holding a Taylor Swift concert in Singapore came up, we broached it immediately and subsequently discussed it in detail, and thereafter reached an agreement for Singapore to be one of Taylor Swift's tour stops. We also saw the opportunity to make this a uniquely Singapore experience, and it hence made sense to take a whole-of-government approach, and subsequently other agencies such as STB were brought in. STB undertook its own assessment of the potential benefits of bringing the concert to Singapore, and subsequently offered a grant to the concert promoter. STB assesses whether to give grants on a case-by-case basis, judiciously weighing up the benefits which might accrue to Singapore if the event were brought in. There has been some online speculation as to the size of the grant. I can say that it is not accurate and not anywhere as high as speculated, but due to business confidentiality reasons, we cannot reveal the specific size of the grant or the conditions of the grant. However, I can assure members of the House that the economic benefits to Singapore are assessed to be significant and outweigh the size of the grant. The direct economic benefits include, for instance, additional tourist arrivals and additional spending on tickets, on flights, hotel stays, as well as entertainment, retail, and dining in Singapore. Other cities which have hosted Taylor Swift concerts similarly reported an increase in economic activity arising from the concerts, and we would expect the same in Singapore. Several market analysts have estimated a dollar range of the economic upside which we are likely to see from the staging of the concerts, and whilst the event has not yet concluded, these may well be right. In addition, beyond the tourism and economic benefits, being able to host A-list artists such as Taylor Swift will also help position Singapore as a cultural hub in Southeast Asia, capable of hosting a range of different arts, music, and culture events, as well as major sporting and lifestyle events. This overall helps to brand Singapore as a fun, vibrant destination. Straits Times noted, for instance, that the benefits include, and I quote, economic growth, cultural enrichment, to global recognition, unquote. Whilst Nikkei Asia reported that the concerts, quote, underscore the city-state's growing status as a pop culture destination, unquote. Business Times also noted that these events made us, quote, look like a modern, open-minded, and vibrant place. But let me add that grants alone would not decide where a performer goes. Promoters of top artists will do their own calculation and assess where they want to perform and for how long. One major consideration is location, which is key. There are many reasons why world-class artists choose to host large-scale concerts in Singapore. These include Singapore's strategic location, quality infrastructure, good amenities, safety, efficiency, and diverse cultural offerings. Chasm also proactively works with the artists and promoters to make their experience of performing in Singapore a good one. All of this helps when attracting top-class events into Singapore. Singapore faces intense regional competition for these concerts and other such events. And we will need to continue investing in our infrastructure and our software to continue attracting marquee entertainment and lifestyle and sporting events into Singapore. So I want to add before I conclude that Chasm's mission goes beyond adding economic value to Singapore. It also extends to building Singapore's affinity with the sports hub, as I said at the outset. We're exploring ways for more Singaporeans from all backgrounds to enjoy marquee acts. To Mr. Seo Chuan's specific question, for some concerts, including high-demand ones like Coldplay and Taylor Swift, Chasm retains some tickets and works with SportCares, which is Sport SG's charity and philanthropic arm, SG Cares volunteer centres, Southeast CDC, and other organizations to give tickets to beneficiaries from lower-income families or at-risk families, as well as to the volunteers from these organizations, so that they too can be a part of the Sports Hub experience. On other occasions, we've also activated areas in the precinct to allow other members of the community to bask in the atmosphere. This includes both entertainment events such as the Taylor Swift concerts, as well as sporting events. For example, at the Singapore Smash 2023, we had community activations at OCBC Square, and also right across the island with tables set up at 18 venues through Singapore, whilst the main event was happening at a sports hub. This provided Singaporeans with the opportunity to try their hand at table tennis and doing it on the same tables, top-class tables that were used by the best players in the world. Beyond marquee entertainment and sports events, Chasm also has a dedicated team that looks at delivering more community programs. While we cover a range of top-tier events that are ticketed, there are also a range of non-ticketed and non-revenue generating events, such as the large-scale festivals during Chinese New Year last year, Hari Raya, and Deepavali. This ensures that we have a strong social return by providing programs for everyone to bond, to interact, and build affinity with the Sports Hub. For example, Sports Hub had hosted a record 43 National School Games finals in FY 2023. And that's more than twice the number previously prior to COVID, which stood at 16. So MCCY, Sport SG, and Chasm will continue to work hard, continue to hustle, and do our best to bring top-class events here, but also continue to make Sports Hub even more accessible to all Singaporeans. Thank you, sir.
Ms. Usha Chandradas.
Thank you, sir. First of all, let me thank the government for its very hard work in bringing all these top-tier events to Singapore. I think the community really appreciates the work that has been done. But I have two supplementary questions for the Minister. First of all, as part of the terms and conditions of the deal that was struck to bring Taylor Swift to Singapore exclusively and with the support of government grants, was there the potential to include the involvement and profiling of local musicians? So, for example, when Coldplay performed earlier this year, local musicians featured as opening acts. When Ed Sheeran performed in Singapore, he famously did a duet with J.J. Lin. He also profiled a watch strap that was made by a local company. So my question is, were similar cross-marketing opportunities contemplated when negotiating with Ms. Swift's team? And if not, is it something that the government can keep in mind for future concert deals? My second question relates to the disclosure of the terms of the deal that was struck between Ms. Swift's team and the Singapore government. As we've seen in the news, the exclusivity clauses have struck a nerve with some of our neighboring countries and caused some amount of tension. So my questions are these. Were confidentiality clauses built into the contracts? And if they were, about the exclusivity arrangements, were these terms breached? And if so, will the government be taking any enforcement action against the relevant parties? Thank you.
Minister Tong.
I thank Ms. Usha Chandradas for her comments. On her first question on cross-marketing, obviously where possible, we would endeavour to do so. And that's why we've seen, in the case of Coldplay, having a local opening act. In other cases as well, what we try and do on some occasion is, even if we can't do it at the main event itself, at the periphery, on non-event days, or in a lead-up or build-up to the A-list event that takes place in Singapore, we try to involve as many local artists as possible. So you've cited some examples, and we will continue to do so. In the case of artists, very often the terms and conditions stipulate not just who is performing, the overall setup, but also the opening act for each of the performers. So in those cases, we will not be able to change the sequence or change the identity of the performers. But rest assured that when we can, we will endeavour to expose our local artists to such platforms. On the second point, yes, there is a confidentiality agreement, and we will assess the terms, and we will take the appropriate measures under advisement. Thank you.
Mrs. Chia Yao Chen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I first must thank Minister for personally leading the Singapore delegation to the LA to negotiate a deal to bring in the Eras tour. I think that is a huge personal involvement on his part, and I thank him for that. I'd like to quote the chairman of CASM, Mr. Keith Magnus, who said that there's now a new DNA and passion that's been brought into the operating culture of the organization, and to quote him, we are constantly in deal mode, unquote. Now, I fully support this basic orientation to go out and make deals and hustle. So in line with that orientation, and to my original question on whether there is a target for the total economic value add from the concert economy that we are trying to grow in Singapore, could the Minister perhaps shed a bit more light on whether we should consider setting a more tangible target in terms of deal volume, deal flow, even if not economic value add, the numbers that we expect to see from the concert economy that we're trying to grow in Singapore. Thank you.
Minister Tong.
So again, I thank Mr. Seah for his remarks. He's raised an important point, but I think we should also set it in context. When we first considered the idea of taking back the Sports Hub, there were questions around, did we have a team who would be able to engage with some of the world's top artists and promoters? Were we able to do this with large-scale crowds? Not forgetting that as we were embarking on these plans, we were still in the midst of dealing with COVID. And so when we looked at the plans overall, obviously those are factors that had to be taken into account. Eventually, I think it's important for us to work out a broader horizon, mid-term through to long-term, and understand where we want to go in terms of targets. And we will do that. But I want to stress to Mr. Seah that, as I said at the outset of my answer, CASM is not trying to deal with the Sports Hub only for economic return. To us, it is equally important that we have social return to the Sports Hub. And to give you an example of how we've been able to achieve this, we work with top-tier marquee events, obviously high and good revenue-generating events. Coldplay, Ed Sheeran, Jackie Chung, and Taylor Swift being some examples. But in doing so, and in making that revenue, we're able to plow it back into non-revenue-generating, but highly impactful social events. I gave the example of the National School Games taking place at the Sports Hub. Almost 3 times the number of events compared to the best prior to COVID days. All of that brings a certain feeling and resonance of school athletes to be playing at the top venue in Singapore, at the Sports Hub. I have given this example to the media as well. Last year, we worked with the schools to stage the rugby finals right after the Singapore Sevens. So we had a pitch that was world-class. We had the venue that was world-class, finished on Sunday with the finals. On Monday or Tuesday, the schools stepped in. And because we were able to host it without the restrictions, the financial restrictions in particular that we had before, we had 8,000 school children at the arena, at the stadium, supporting, cheering on their school. I was there, and I think the feeling of camaraderie, the feeling of togetherness, being able to cheer your top athletes at such a forum, I think is something that we value tremendously. So these and other examples are what we want to go for, using the Sports Hub as a draw, as a vehicle, as an asset that government can use right across the spectrum, and also combining it with non-Sports Hub facilities. For example, the rest of Kallang Alive, the precinct which I mentioned, there are parts which can be activated in support of and in tandem with the Sports Hub. So all these are the main motivations for CASM when they do their calculations for events for any particular given year.
I'm trying to move the PQs along. We're still at the first set of PQs. So I will allow for a few more excuses, but please keep it succinct, and likewise, replies to be succinct. Mr. Gerald Giam.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Minister for his reply. I assume he's answering the question that I filed for tomorrow as well. Sir, given that Singapore is such an attractive destination for marquee events, why is there even a need to give taxpayer-funded grants to attract them? And secondly, did the government negotiate to make Taylor Swift's Eras Tour the only blank space in Southeast Asia? And did it realize that this may be perceived by some of our neighbours as being mean?
Minister Tong.
So I'll try not to make my answer the 10-minute version. Mr. Giam filed a question for tomorrow with MTI on STB's position on grants. That will be taken separately, so I'm not answering on behalf of STB. On your two questions, the first is, well, let me deal with the second, which I think is also related to the first. The real question is this: you have to make your calculations and work out what's in Singapore and Singaporeans' best interest. If you don't have a certain economy of scale to play in Singapore over X number of nights for a period of time, you won't be able to reap the economies of scale. Then there's going to be a very different balance to the considerations. The concert might take place in Singapore, but for fewer nights, far fewer nights. Or it might not even take place at all in Singapore. So we've got to look at the overall calculation and decide, for a particular event, what is the resonance with Singaporeans? What international, regional draw might it have? And we make this calculation overall. And it is not in every case that we decide that we need to make a grant or we need to negotiate in a particular way. And every event, whether it's lifestyle, sporting, arts, culture, music, has a different consideration. And we are motivated by different outcomes that we want to achieve. And so whether we shape it in one way, give a grant in another way, or organize our framework to host the event in a particular way, all that is shaped by the outcomes that we want to achieve. And so in this case, we were mindful that if we looked at it holistically, if we wanted an opportunity for Singapore to be one of the stops, and then you look at the past tour history, it's very difficult to be 1 or 2 nights alone because of the setup. So we had to look at that as quite a material consideration for discussing with the Taylor Swift team on how long and for what duration to host it in Singapore. And then we also have to judge what's the demand that we have in the local market. So these, I hope, explains to Mr. Giam some of the suite of considerations that we have in deciding how to approach this, which events to put a grant out to, and on what terms, and how to structure it, and also taking into account the overall demand and objectives in Singapore.